Larry, you say this wine is fruity and smooth and not bitter, but yet you say it's a bone dry wine. How is that possible? It's dry, but yet it's not dry? I mean, I'm very confused. Now you have me confused. Well, let's try to clear up that confusion. Hi, I'm Larry Baker. I'm a certified level 2 sommelier and senior wine and spirit specialist for ABC Fine Wines and Spirits in beautiful Sunrise, Florida. Okay, there's a difference between the flavor profile of a wine and the technicality of winemaking in a wine. And the terminology confuses a lot of average consumers, and I can understand that. And I'm trying to here to clarify that. Generally, the rule is, unless it's a fortified wine, the lower the alcohol, the sweeter the wine, because they usually leave the sugar, the residual sugar that would have converted the yeast into alcohol in the bottle or in the barrel before they bottle it, and that makes a sweet wine. However, there are some wines that are fruity and smooth and don't have an ounce of those bitter, grippy tannins that you may like, and that's the style you're looking for, that have maybe 0 or 1 or 0.1 or 0.8 or 2 to 3 grams per liter of residual sugar, not 14 or 15 or 20 grams of residual sugar per liter, and yet still be that's a sweet wine but low alcohol wine. So the difference is between, and I'll explain that here with a few examples, because I know it's a little confusing. I'm getting even a little confused as I talk about it, as my train of thought, because I want to make this as clear as possible. In my language and in the winery language, in the winemaker's language, a bone dry wine, for example, this is not bone dry. This would be a wine that would be semi-sweet. This is Valkenberg's Dornfelder. Dornfelder is a grape from Germany. It's a semi-sweet wine, but as I look at it, the alcohol is 8.5% alcohol, which is not a lot when the average wine is 13.5, 14, 14.5. We've seen some 15s out there with 1.5% that they're allowed to report. But either way, you said the lower the alcohol. In this case, it's true. This wine would be a semi-sweet wine, but you also got very minimal alcohol, lower alcohol than normal. So that means that if they would have fermented this wine into higher alcohol levels, let's say this Dornfelder was 13.5, 14 wine, the wine would be a dry tasting wine, but it would also have higher alcohol. See, now let's do the reverse here. This is a 2015 from John and Kathy Lauer, Rachel Rose winemaker, Bryn Mawr Pinot Noir. The alcohol in this is 13.6%. Now, yet this wine is loaded with fruits of blueberries and baking spices and silky smooth, lots of fruits, Now, some of you may call that a sweet wine or use the word sweet. It's very fruity, but technically, because there's such a minimal amount, if any, residual sugar left in the bottle because they let it ferment, to the proper alcohol content that they wanted, that the wine would be considered technically a bone dry wine. This would be a bone dry or dry wine, but yet the taste of it wouldn't be bone dry. It would taste fruity. Now, what does this all come? How does this affect us? It's all a word that we call brix, B-R-I-X, brix. That is sugar level. That is how sugar level in grapes when harvesting is measured with a brixometer. That they take sample of the juice and see where the ripeness of the sugar of the grapes are. So technically, if you want to achieve a bone dry wine that has a silky smooth taste, you want those grapes to be ripe, but ripe enough that the alcohol doesn't go over the legal amount. You might have a 15.5% alcohol wine or a 16.5% alcohol wine that because it had a higher sugar level, but you let all that sugar convert into that alcohol without leaving the residual sugar in the bottle, you got a bone dry wine, but you got a big, bold, jammy flavored wine with almost next to none leftover alcohol. So it's all about the most important decision that a winery would do that'll affect the technical term bone dry wine, and it is at the time that you make the decision to harvest the grapes, when to bring the grapes in. You might get slower yield on a hot year, but if you don't want because if you let those grapes, which many American wineries do, many South American wineries do, if you let that, especially Napa is really guilty of the California wine is playing upon the American palate's natural taste for sugar and really sweet wine. They let the grapes get overripe. So they have an abundancy of sugar when they bring the grapes in. So now your Brix level, or the way they measure the sugar, is much higher than it's supposed to be, and they purposely do that so that they let all the sugar ferment, not all of the sugar, they let the sugar convert to the alcohol level, which is usually pretty high. I've seen a lot of 16s, 16.5 Cabernets and Merlot, but yet there was so much sugar because they were picked at an overripe stage that they're still 10, 20, 15, 12 grams or whatever of residual sugar still left in the bottle. So you have a wine that is not bone dry technically and tastes like sweet, but yet you still have an high alcohol content. But yet the proper way to make a sweet wine is to pick the grapes ripe in that state where they're sweet, but then you have lower alcohol like the Dornfelder, 8.5% alcohol, because you leave all the leftover sugar. So again, I'm going to say that bone dry wine to me means that you pick the wine at the optimal level where you want the alcohol level to be at 23, 24, 25 Brix, so that you know that you could ferment almost every drop of that sugar, let it eat the yeast and ferment into full alcohol, but still give you the style of wine of a ripe taste and silky, plush, and smooth without those bitter dryness or notes that you want on the wine. But yet it's a bone dry wine technically, but has a silky, smooth taste because all the sugar is out of that bottle and converted the yeast to alcohol. Where the other way, you can either ferment the wine into only 8.5% alcohol and have all that sugar, remaining in the bottle, and that would be a semi-sweet wine. And on the other hand, you can also have an overripe style where you pick the grapes at 27, 28 Brix, and you have, if you let it go to full alcohol, you'd be dealing with 19%, which is against the law on a still wine to have anything over 17 on the market or on the label or actually calculated. And then you've got 20 grams of residual sugar left in the bottle that didn't turn to alcohol, and you still have a high alcohol. It's all about when you pick. Last example of what I call a bone dry wine, but yet tastes beautifully silky and plush fruit, probably very low. I don't know the exact details on this wine. This is Primitivo, which is, as we know, Zinfandel. This is Gregory Perucci down in Manduria, who took the cuttings from Ridge Winery. I've talked about this wine before, but Gregory, the Pope of Primitivo, or Zinfandel, as you know it in America, and they have both names on this label, will be the first one to tell you that it's one of the most difficult grapes to control the sugar level in that wine. So it can escape from you very high. And I've seen some 16%, 16.5% from the Puglia region of Italy, and California Zins are off the chain, ridiculous high level of alcohol, but those grapes are overripe, and they didn't pick at the right time where they purposely let them get overripe. So you still have 15.5% alcohol, but you got a ton of sugar left in the wine. So it's not a bone dry wine technically, and it is also a wine that tastes sweet, but this wine has a jammy taste, but it's also got some, silkiness. But at 15% alcohol, I'm sure that Gregory's expertise picked these wines at the right sugar level so he could ferment into a bone dry wine at 15% alcohol or so, give or take, and still get that silky smooth. So technically, this is a bone dry wine or a dry wine. I would list this as a dry wine. On our charts, it has a 2 on the level of sweetness, which is pretty bone dry. The higher the number, the higher the sweetness. And yet, there's probably very little, if any, residual sugar left in the bottle. So I hope that clears it up a little bit. There's a difference of what we call bone dry and what is actually a wine that has leftover sugar in the wine that has a sweet, sugary taste because it's either low alcohol or they picked the grapes at an overripe style and left most of the sugar in the bottle, even by fermenting the alcohol. So it really comes down to technically being a bone dry. It all comes down to the picking the grapes, and at the time you pick them, make sure your sugar levels are picked proper ripeness for that grape, and that you ferment. Like most of Oregon, Washington wines are bone dry wine. maybe a tenth of a gram, 0.1, 0.2 gram of sugar left in that bottle, and you might get a little higher alcohol, but you have to make the decision to pick the grapes at the right time. Bone dry technically or bone dry in the taste is two different things, okay? I hope that's a little bit more clearer. You can look up the information on these winery websites that I showed you, or our website, abcfws.com, but you should go to a lot of wineries that you like and look at the composition, the technical data, and see what the RS, residual sugar, is in that wine to see if this is a bone dry wine technically, or it's just a sweet lime because they left a bunch of sugar in the wine, okay? And in general, like those Dornfelders or the Moscatos, they're 5% alcohol, so most of that sugar is just at the dessert wine, and it's all left in the bottle and didn't ferment, so it gets a little confusing, but I hope that clears it up. You could always hit me up on my website as well. So remember, wine is not for snobs. It's for everyday people like you and me, and those who want a bone dry wine technically, but also want a smooth taste and no bitterness. That can be achieved if you pick the grapes at the right time. See you next time.